Everyone has a story. Hello, Marcos.
Hey, Doug, how are you?
Stories have power. They help us understand each other. This is Jessop's Journal. Marcos, it's time to sign in the book.
I'll be more than happy to. Let's see here. You got a pen or?
Oh, yeah. Right
There it is.
Marcos, thanks for coming on Jessop's Journal today.
Oh, well, thanks for inviting me.
So, you and I have known each other for quite a while in the television business. You are the crime and punishment reporter. Who the heck came up with crime and punishment reporter
I
idea?
know. That is a kind of a funny little slogan there, but I just worked there.
Yeah, okay, well, you've worked there for a long time. How long have you worked there?
At Channel 4, 15 years.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
We're going to kind of talk a little bit about, your career and how you got into that. But the first thing I want to know is, tell me about growing up.
Well, Doug, I was born a boy.
Yes, I'm glad to hear that. Okay.
Was born and raised in Wyoming, and my family is from Mexico. My parents came here. They're older parents because we have a large family, and so they're now deceased. But they came here to the U.S. in the 1920s, and they were basically like today's story of the immigration. They were looking for work, and they followed the work wherever it was. So we were kind of like that group. My family and others were just migrating from job to job. They'd go from Texas to Arizona, California. They'd go to Washington State and Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, and go as far as Michigan, and then come back down south for the winter. And eventually what happened, Doug, was that my parents just decided to settle in Wyoming. My dad got a job in the railroad, and they settled there in the northern part of Wyoming. It's a small town called Lovell. It's about 40 miles, outside of Cody. Most people are familiar with Cody in the northern part of Wyoming, so it's a smaller town, one of the smaller towns up north, and so that's where I grew up. Spent a lot of years there in the Lovell area. Went from high school, and then from high school went to the local community college in Powell, and then University of Wyoming, and eventually I was able to spring out and find a job.
So what was your first job?
My first job was working in the fields.
Okay.
My parents were, at that time my dad was working in the railroad, and my mom worked at the house. She raised all the children. We had a lot of kids, 16 over the course of 20 years.
Really?
5 of them died at near childbirth, or 2 years, 3 years, that time of thing, childhood illnesses and such. So 11 of us survived. And in the summertime, my dad would basically make us work in the fields. We were doing sugar beets. And it was just one of the worst jobs I've ever had, Doug, was hoeing sugar beets. I mean, it's just brutal, You're hoeing the sugar beets, you're pulling the weeds, your back hurts, you're hot, there's gnats, there's mosquitoes, allergies for me, but we would work, and it was money that we would earn, and a lot of times it was money for school clothes.
So do you think your mom was trying to teach you anything with that job?
Oh, she did, because I was always complaining. I hated, you get up at 4:30 in the morning. No kid should have to be doing that in summer, And I was out there, and I just hated it, and I complained. I was probably the biggest complainer out there of all the kids. But my mom says, if you don't get an education, if you don't go to school, if you don't go to college, this is where you're going to end up at.
How did you get into the television business?
I got my first job in Blythe, California, as a disc jockey, and was spinning records. And I don't know if you've ever lived in Blythe, California, but boy, we're talking 1978 or something of that nature. Blythe, California is in the middle of, it's right on the Colorado River, on the border of California and Arizona. It's hot.
Yes.
It's like Needles. Needles is like 80 miles,
Yep.
from there. The first day I get there, and I'm looking for a place to live, an apartment. It's like, yeah, I like this place right here. So anyway, so I got there, put in the deposit. I can't remember how much I was paying, $50 a month or something
wow.
of that nature. And that night, that first night I was there, Doug, I turned the lights off, and I'm sleeping, and I'm hearing this little rustling, rustling out there. I was like, what is that? I have no idea. So I well, maybe it'll just go away,
Yeah.
And then I just keep hearing this little sounds of something, I could not figure out what it was. And it was kind of creeping me out.
Yeah.
Now, It's like, what did I get into? So at some point I turned the light on, and oh my gosh, I just see all these cockroaches just all over the floor on the bed. And it's like, oh my, it's like a Stephen King
Yeah, it's like
movie.
whoosh.
Whoa! Ah.
How did you switch from the radio side to the TV side?
Well, I did about 2 years in the newspaper in Casper Star Tribune, and the problem with that is that it was newspaper. It's nice. I like it. You want to sit down. It's very thorough, but it wasn't exciting. I met a friend there, and even to this date, he still is a friend of mine, and we work together here at Salt Lake.
Okay.
His name's Ed, and he was MMJ there in Cheyenne. And that time we called them one-man bands because they shot, they wrote, they edit, they reported the stories. And he was there in Cheyenne as well. And so I was just kind of hanging around him, learning the trade, learning how to run the camera, learning how to be in front of the camera. And he was more than happy to help me and show me and things like that. And so I started picking up on that. And of course, he took advantage of me too, because I was hauling his equipment, and stuff like that. But I enjoyed it. And then when Ed got a job in Salt Lake, that job was opened. And so I thought, well, I'll apply for that. And so I think, I should be able to get that job. And they hired some woman out of Chicago.
Okay.
And I look at that woman the first time she comes into Cheyenne, and I'm going like, oh, this is the woman who took my job?
Yeah.
That was mine. I was angry, I was like, arr! And so, look at her, she's so small, she can't even pick up the stuff. I'm not going to help her,
Yeah.
I'm not even going to show her, this and that, But eventually, I befriended her, and I thought, well, she's probably going to move on, and maybe there'll be another opening there,
Right.
And
Okay,
I'm in
just
Cheyenne.
bide your time, right?
Yeah, I'm in Cheyenne.
Okay.
I'm at the top of the world, for a Wyoming boy, It turns out that, I started liking her a lot, and eventually, long story short, I married that woman from Chicago.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, and so I moved
yeah.
into to Salt Lake back in '92.
Okay.
So I've been to in Salt Lake, covering just about everything here in Salt Lake, from elections to somebody's water pipe breaking in the basement, but I developed more of a niche for crime.
Okay.
And at that time period, I was not punishment yet. I was just doing crime. And so I enjoyed it. I like covering stories about crime. There was something about, it's a mystery of whodunit, and I enjoyed that, being out there in the story and kind of playing detective.
Right.
Who did this, And so I would always look at the cops, look at them, and find out what they're doing, who they're talking to, why are they knocking on that door over there. And so I was always, as a reporter, just analyzing police work out there. And it was kind of a cat and mouse game, because I'd go over there right after the police left the house, and they'd look at me and go, what are you doing here? Nothing, I just following the trail.
It's funny because there's a promo that the station did with you that's done in an alley, with a trench coat and everything. And it's just like, okay, I'm going there. It's like Marcos Ortiz, Salt Lake's Dick Tracy, So
we call it gumshoeing.
Gumshoeing, there you go.
Police call it gumshoeing. That's kind of what I do as well, too.
Well, I remember I was doing a story out in the prison, and I came to you for some advice and said, how do you separate the crime stories? Because we're talking some pretty serious stuff.
Oh yeah.
And then how do you keep your sanity? How do you separate that and your, when you go home?
Sure, because it really affects a lot of people. I know I have seen a lot of reporters that just can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
You know, because it just gnaws on them, and they just like, I can't take this. I don't want this anymore. And I understand that. You know, we're all built differently.
Right.
I divide it as a professional and a personal life that I've established over the course of my career. I know it's personal, I know it's professional, and I've been able to split the two. So when I go to a crime scene, there's anger, there's despair, there's sadness. I'll treat that with great respect. I will not make light of it.
Right.
But after it's said and done, I have the ability to turn it off and go see my wife and my daughter and go with my dog. And I tune it out. I've been blessed that I have that ability to tune it out.
You are in a club, I guess you would call it, that nobody wants to be a part of. And as far as I know, you are one of the very few people that have witnessed not one but 2 executions. And one was by lethal injection, but I believe that you saw one of the last firing squads.
Ronnie Lee Gardner, yeah.
Wow. How do you process that?
Well, you treat it once again as a journalist. You know, this is your job. This is what you got to go do. Personally, you know, I'm a Catholic. I have great faith. Personally, you say a prayer for this person that's about to be executed. You say a prayer that there's forgiveness for this individual. And then you say a prayer for the victims, the families that in their mind, they're finally attaining justice. So from that standpoint, that's the personal part of me that goes in there. And I treat it that way, you know. You ask God to help me carry me through this whole process. And I'm a really firm believer in my Savior, Lord Jesus Christ, that can carry me through those time periods that appear to be rough for everyone else. And I get to do that. And I can go in there and I can report it as a journalist. I feel that, you know, He has empowered me to be able to do my job and do it correctly. And so when I do that and I enter those types of scenarios, I really do turn to my religion to help me get through that moment, because it's a difficult time. It's rare that you see somebody die in front of you. You know, and that's exactly what happened in both of those instances. They were very different, but to see a human being die in front of you, it can really it can weigh heavily on you. But I'm very fortunate that, you know, I can be carried through that. You ever heard of that time where the Lord carries you, you know, the footprints in the sand? He carried you during that time when you thought you were alone. No, He's there.
Yeah.
He helps you.
How were they? You mentioned they were different. How are they different?
The lethal injection with Graham Parsons was interesting because that was the first one that I went to. And what happened there was that it was almost like surgery. You're at a doctor's office, you're at a clinic, you're in a hospital bed, whatever you want to call it. But there he is, he's laying there on the gurney, and there's tubes. And then at some point, you know, the medical professional comes over there and inserts chemicals into his veins, and he just dies peacefully. And like I say, it's almost like a medical treatment that this is happening. Firing squad, a little bit different. It's more aggressive, more violent, just for that moment, you know, because Gardner was tied down, arms, straps, you know, legs, chest strapped in a chair, and then he's got a black hood over his head. So right away, the visual is kind of like eerie looking, you know. It's like, wow, you've seen this on television, you know, or you've seen it in pictures, and there it is right in front of you. Here's this guy breathing. And then that's what you notice right there is his chest, you know, because it's kind of like you can feel the blood pressure of the individual because he's kind of like breathing a little heavy, you know, it's more rapid and such. And so from that standpoint, you can feel the tenseness of that room, just the look, his body. And, you know, he's got like a big round patch, dark patch over his heart, you know. And then you see at some point when they're ready, all of a sudden it's like fire. I remember, telling the rifleman to fire, and it just woke you up, just scared you, like, whoa. And then you can see the patch turn crimson, because someone hit him right in the heart. And you can see his arms flinching, holding on for life, grasping. So that scene is what you really recall, and you remember seeing someone's life pass in front of you. And it's a violent scene because of all of what I just described. There's much more to it in an execution of a firing squad than there is lethal injection, and so that's the difference of the two. You just feel the aggressiveness and the violence that's going on.
Thank you very, very much
you're
for
more than
coming on, and thank you for sharing. I appreciate it.
You bet, Doug. It was enjoyable.
Marcos, we have some lovely parting gifts for you for coming on today.
Oh, all this.
Oh yeah, so let's check this out. First, Rustico made a special leather journal just for you.
Oh, wow. It's got my name on it, too.
Oh, yeah.
That's cool.
Now, I love their pens. This pen like writes by itself, okay? So they've given you a very nice copper pen.
Wow, that's impressive. Look at that. That looks so
It's
nice.
the one I use all the time. It is. So the folks at Taylor Cooperative are the guys that make all my shirts and my suits. And they're going to make you your own personalized shirt.
Oh, wow. That's so
There you
great.
go. I have been known to wear a hat or two. And so
course.
the folks at JW Custom Hats are my hatter, and they're going to make a custom hat just for Marcos Ortiz.
Wow, I get to look like you.
Well, I don't know. And then, of course, we've got the folks from Ogden's Own Distillery. They have got your own little booze basket there for you. So we want to thank all our underwriters. But the other thing we want people to know is we want the people out there to remember stories have power. They help us understand each other. With another entry in Jessop's Journal, I'm Doug Jessop, ABC4 News.